Howdy again, folks. Dan Davis here once again. This is going to be the third segment of author information for the program Author Information on the YouTube channel. I keep mentioning this book that I'm working on. It's my next book. It'll be out, well, I mean, it'll be done. It is pretty much done. I mean, I can have it off to the publishers or printers or whatever within about a month or so. I keep doing some excerpts and stuff from it, so I wanted to kind of describe a little bit more about it, kind of go through it. And so I've put it here on this author information program. This will be, again, the third segment. Today is January 19th, and it's my 54th birthday. 1918. Good Lord, 18. Well, anyway, it's 2018. Can you believe it? 2018. Anyway, okay, so 3D Life in Poetry and Prose. It's basically 4 sections. A brief autobiography, which is essentially a book within a book. It's got 8 different chapters in it. And this could essentially be its own book. Then there's some poems, family, friends, places, and thoughts. Then there's some romantic poems, in love or thereabouts. And then there's an epilogue that kind of ties everything together. Now, to explain a little bit about how this came to be, I thought, instead of just talking, I would read part of the introduction, because otherwise I tend to digress too much. So let me read this to you real quick. This book originally started as simply a collection of almost 100 poems I had written over the last few decades. Upon reviewing them with a couple of different writing groups, however, I realized a few problems. First of all, many of the poems were not as good as I had remembered them, and some needed extensive editing. There were also far too many of the romantic variety, with similar emotions expressed repeatedly. Another important factor in the evolution of this book was that, when reading the poems to fellow writers, I often found myself having to explain to whom the works had been addressed, the circumstances under which they were written, and how I had arrived in such situations. In many cases, lines in the poems also needed further explanation so they would not appear so whimsical or esoteric. Upon considerable reflection, it occurred to me that many of the pieces could use some form of backstory as an introduction in order for each to make more sense. I also realized that the backstories themselves could be fairly interesting and hopefully even compensate for whatever deficiencies I might have as a poet. While in the process of selecting and editing the poems I thought worthy of inclusion, and deciding what I would say in the backstories of each one, it further seemed that an overall backstory would be helpful to explain exactly how the various settings for each poem had materialized in the first place. Hence was born the idea for Part 1, Backstory, a Brief Autobiography. The concept particularly made sense when I recalled how dozens of people had told me over the last decade or two that the story of my life would make a particularly intriguing autobiography. And a little part here. The title of the book is quite deliberate as well. On the most basic level, 3D can symbolize the initials of my name, Daniel David Davis. From a more insightful viewpoint, it can additionally represent the global spectrum of issues that occupy my thoughts, like all the different subjects that are going to be covered on the show. At the very least, it reflects my affinity for activities of a thoroughly three-dimensional nature, from rappelling and scuba diving to bungee jumping and skydiving. So, I've already done a couple little excerpts. Well, this is one. I've done a poem for the dedication and acknowledgement section, the first author information, if you want to check those out. But you'll probably be seeing a couple more before this thing is, well, even when it gets sent off to the printers or publishers or whoever, I'm going to be doing excerpts to help promote it. So writers, take note. Readers, take note. Anyway, so if you hear me talking about this book in the future, this is where to find out more about it, and I'll point it to you if I ever do that. So, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again. Have a great day.